Picture this. A Catholic cardinal, draped in crimson, walking through the echoing marble halls of the Vatican. And then, halfway across the world, a Tibetan lama sits enthroned on this vibrant cushion with rows and rows of monks bowing in perfect, silent synchrony before him.
Right, or, travel back in time and you see a caliph addressing a vast roaring crowd from a sun-drenched palace balcony.
Exactly. Or even step into a sacred grove in West Africa, where a Yoruba priest invokes the Orishas, interpreting the very will of the gods. What do all these images have in common? Well, it turns out that across the world, human beings didn't just build hierarchies on Earth. We built them in heaven.
Which brings us to the central premise of our sources today. When the divine is structured, human society inevitably follows.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is to really explore that architecture of power. We're looking at a fascinating stack of sources, historical case studies of world religions, psychological frameworks, and we're also using the fictional world of San Vitae, specifically the Awakening, as a sort of narrative backdrop.
Right, because we want to unpack how societies historically structured the heavens to control the earth, which forces us to ask, do gods actually demand hierarchy, or do we simply project our own political needs onto the sacred?
It's a massive, slightly intimidating question for you to chew on today. But before we look at how specific religions structured their hierarchies, we really have to ask why. Like, why do human beings crave this kind of sacred order in the first place?
Well, the psychological analysis in our dossier shows that it actually doesn't begin with the desire to be oppressed. It begins with a profound biological and psychological need for safety.
Because the world is terrifying.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Humans are uniquely burdened with existential dread. We are highly aware of our own mortality, and we're constantly surrounded by the unpredictable chaos of nature, disease, war.
Things we just can't control.
Exactly. So psychologically, we naturally seek meaning in our suffering, and we look for authority in uncertainty. When the physical world feels dangerous and random, a highly structured, orderly heaven provides immense psychological relief.
It creates moral certainty. Okay, let's unpack this. Because listening to you describe that, it almost sounds like humanity collectively looked at the terrifying void of the universe and decided, you know what, we desperately need a cosmic HR department.
A cosmic HR department? Yeah, that's actually a perfect way to look at it.
Right. Like, if there's a boss of the universe, and that boss has a very clear organizational chart, meaning, this angel reports to this god, this priest reports to this angel, and I report to this priest, then I don't have to carry the terrifying weight of figuring out my own existential purpose.
No, you don't. You just look at the chart, find your little box, and do your job.
But I have to push back here. Doesn't that make obedience dangerously easy?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if the boss of the universe says, hey, your place is in the dirt, you can't exactly file a grievance.
You really can't. And you've identified the exact double-edged sword at the heart of our research. There's a really powerful quote from the sources. It says, when hierarchy is sacred, obedience feels righteous.
Wow. Obedience feels righteous.
Yeah, it is the psychological trap in its purest form. The cosmic HR department provides deep emotional security. Like if a famine wipes out a village, an unstructured universe just says it's a random, meaningless tragedy.
Which is incredibly bleak.
It is. But a structured universe says, well, it's a punishment or a test from the top of the chain of command, which implies that order still exists.
So even if it's awful, someone is still driving the bus.
Exactly. But the dark side of that security is that it locks people permanently into their designated social roles. It makes questioning the political system not just illegal, but an actual sin against reality itself.
Right. So it reduces societal anxiety, but the absolute cost is individual autonomy.
Spot on.
So since we crave this cosmic HR department, how have different cultures actually designed it? Because looking at our case studies, the variety of human imagination is just wild.
It really is. And if we want to understand how it functions, we should probably start with the classic model, which is the Catholic Church.
Which is the classic pyramid structure, right?
Precisely. The Catholic structure is the quintessential historical example of vertical authority. It operates as a rigid, sacred pyramid. In this model, truth and authority do not bubble up from the congregation.
It's all top-down.
Completely. It flows exclusively downward from a single apex, papal supremacy, down to the cardinals, then the bishops, the priests, and finally the laity.
And what's wild is how that singular vertical line didn't just stay inside the walls of the cathedral. The dossier points out how that exact pyramid historically shaped medieval politics and social class.
Oh, absolutely. Think about how a medieval king justified his absolute rule. He is above the peasants, just as the Pope is above the flock, just as God is above man.
The spiritual architecture literally became the political architecture. But what happens if a society completely rejects the idea of a single bloodline or an appointed supreme ruler? How do you maintain a cosmic hierarchy without a physical succession plan?
That brings us to the Himalayas and Tibetan Buddhism. This is where we see authority mapped onto time rather than just space. It's what the sources call cyclical authority.
So it's not about who your dad was or who appointed you.
No, governance here is based on past lives, on reincarnation. You have lamas and tulkus who are recognized as reincarnated spiritual masters, sitting atop a vast monastic hierarchy.
So in this system, spiritual rank literally equals social rank.
Yes, and the monasteries functionally served as the central administrative hubs of the society.
Which is a fascinating, albeit super complex way to solve the classic succession problem that usually tears kingdoms apart. You aren't watching five ambitious sons go to war over who gets the throne.
Right, because you are actively searching for the soul of the previous leader in a new body.
But practically speaking, how does that even work? I mean, you find a 2-year-old child who you believe is the reincarnated lama. A toddler cannot run a monastery, let alone a government.
Well, the mechanics of it are entirely reliant on a regency system. Because the tulku is a child, deeply educated senior monks and regents handle the actual levers of administration and political power until the child comes of age.
Oh, okay. So it preserves the divine continuity of the hierarchy while allowing experienced political operators to maintain stability.
Exactly. The sacred narrative of reincarnation entirely pacifies the public's anxiety about leadership, while the bureaucratic reality keeps the society running.
It's a really elegant fusion of mysticism and practicality. Now, contrast both the pyramid and the cycle with the Islamic caliphates. Our dossier labels this as legal moral authority.
Right, so it's not just a top-down pyramid of appointed people, and it's not based on searching for reincarnating souls. It's an architecture built entirely on sacred law.
So how does power function there? Is it separated?
It's a separation yet fusion of different types of power. You have political and military authority held by the caliphs, but they cannot simply declare divine right the way a European king might.
Because they're bound by the law.
Yes, they are bound by legal and moral authority, which flows through Sharia, the sacred law, and is interpreted by the ulama, the religious scholars.
So if a caliph wants to legitimize a massive political move, like, I don't know, launching a war or changing taxation, he can't just point to the sky and say, hey, God told me to.
Historically, no, he couldn't. He needed the scholars to validate that action against the texts.
That completely shifts the power dynamic.
It does. Rank in the system is achieved through rigorous scholarship, intense piety, and proximity to prophetic lineage. Sacred governance is less about the inherent magic of the leader and much more about upholding the intricate law of the divine.
To text is the supreme authority.
Exactly. And your rank is determined by your mastery of it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've looked at the vertical pyramid, the endless cycle, and the strict rule of law. But when our sources shift to the Yoruba cosmology from West Africa, they throw out the top-down mold entirely. It's described as distributed authority.
Yeah, this is a very different paradigm.
So in this model, I'm assuming it's basically a flat circle, like everyone is equal, there are no leaders, and it's just a totally egalitarian spiritual commune.
It's a common misconception, but no, it is absolutely not a flat system without leaders. It is a highly structured hierarchy, but it organizes power through specialization rather than domination.
Okay, through the Hierarchies, right?
Yes, the Yoruba system structures society through the Hierarchies, which are divine archetypes holding very distinct, specific domains of influence.
Like what kind of domains?
Like iron and war, or water and healing, or wisdom and divination.
Ah, okay. So instead of one boss overseeing every single department, you have highly specialized forces that have to interact with each other.
Precisely.
But how does that assign a normal person their place in society?
Through incredibly complex divination systems like Ifa. When a person seeks guidance, a highly trained priest uses a mathematical system of casting palm nuts, or a divination chain, to access an immense oral corpus of poetry and wisdom.
Wow, so it's a deeply systemic process.
Very much so. The signs that appear mathematically map a person's destiny and energy to a specific orisha, and that mapping gives the person a specific social role, civic duty, and community to belong to.
So it's relational. It's not a ladder you climb to step on the people below you. Authority flows through harmony and spiritual alignment between these different groups.
Exactly. If the priest of agriculture and the priest of iron both have divine authority in their own domains, they have to collaborate to keep the society functioning.
The architecture relies on balance between these distributed divine forces, rather than one supreme boss barking orders from the top.
And if we step back to look at all four of these structures, the vertical Catholic pyramid, the cyclical Tibetan reincarnation, the legal moral Islamic scholarship, and the distributed Yoruba archetypes, we see that the architecture of heaven fundamentally dictates the architecture of the city.
It completely shapes gender roles, resource allocation, and cultural identity. I really want you, the listener, to pause for a second and map this onto your own life. Think about the systems you navigate every single day.
Yeah, your workplace, your local government, your community.
Which of these four models does it most closely resemble? Are you operating in a rigid vertical pyramid where truth only flows downward from the CEO? Are you in a system governed by strict, unbending legal texts and compliance scholars? Or are you in a distributed network where authority is shared based on specific domains of expertise?
It is kind of jarring when you realize these ancient sacred blueprints are the exact same schematics running the secular software of our modern lives.
It really is. And it takes us to the most dangerous aspect of our research. We've seen how natural belief systems evolved to soothe human anxiety and organize early societies.
Right, but the terrifying inverse of that is when a ruling class realizes they can reverse engineer that psychological need.
Exactly. If earthly religions are naturally structured to provide specific types of social order, what happens when a group actively engineers a religion exclusively to serve themselves?
Which brings us to the narrative mirror we are using today, the fictional world of San Vitae, the awakening.
For those who aren't familiar with the book, the ruling class in this universe are known as the Sanitary. And looking at the dossiers on their societal structure, it is genuinely terrifying.
Because they don't just use one of these architectural models. The Santary's composite mythology shows that they studied the mechanics of human belief and weaponized all of them.
Right. They essentially built a Frankenstein's monster of faith.
Exactly. They utilize a supreme authority figure, perfectly mirroring the Catholic vertical model, to ensure unquestioned obedience at the macro level. They employ reincarnated lineage myths for their elite, echoing the Tibetan cyclical model.
Which justifies why the same families hold wealth generation after generation, right?
Yeah.
Because it's their quote-unquote soul's right.
Precisely. They enforce a brutal sacred law that cannot be questioned, much like the rigid interpretation of the legal moral model. And they even incorporate distributed divine archetypes into the daily labor of the underclass, ensuring every mundane aspect of society is spiritually governed.
So they took the fundamental source code of human faith and weaponized it into a social prison.
And their motive isn't to provide comfort or existential peace for the populace. They use this engineered religious hierarchy exclusively to legitimize domination.
To sanctify horrific violence against the underclass, the humanes, and to control their identity.
The gods of San Vitae do not descend from the heavens. They rise from the needs of the powerful. They are forged in political war rooms.
Which is exactly why the character of Kurian, his awakening in the narrative, is such a vital case study for our themes today. Kurian's realization isn't just a political rebellion where he decides he wants lower taxes or better food.
No, it's a shattering existential realization. He discovers the architecture.
He realizes that the gods he was taught to fear are simply political tools. The sacred is engineered, and the hierarchy he has suffered under is entirely human-made.
He essentially finds out the cosmic HR department is a fraud designed specifically to keep him locked in a cubicle.
And if we pull Kurian's revelation out of the fiction and look at our own historical reality, I have to ask, how often do we fail to recognize the engineered nature of our own societal structures?
Far too often. We accept things as just the way it is, or the natural order of things, without stopping to realize that at some point in history, someone built that specific structure to benefit themselves.
Kurian's realization really forces us to confront the ultimate philosophical question raised by our sources today.
It does. We've spent this entire time looking at how these structures are built and why humans crave them. But we have to address the core dispute here.
Does the divine actually require hierarchy, or is hierarchy just a human projection?
Exactly. And the texts we are analyzing break this debate down into three distinct arguments. It's really important to look at who traditionally champions each one.
Right, let's take these one by one and ground them. Argument one is the blueprint. This is the argument that hierarchy reflects an actual cosmic order. The universe has a metaphysical structure, and leaders are meant to guide the uninitiated.
And historically, who argues for this? Usually the people sitting at the very top of the pyramid.
Oh, of course. If you are the Pope or the King, it is highly beneficial to argue that your absolute power is baked into the fabric of reality itself.
Then we have argument two, which is the corruption. This perspective maintains that the divine is real, but argues that human hierarchy actively corrupts the sacred.
So in this view, institutions replace actual spiritual experience.
Right, true spirituality is meant to be direct and egalitarian, but humans inevitably build institutions with bureaucracy and gatekeeping. The people who champion this are usually the reformers.
The mystics, the monks, the dissident priests who look at the wealth of the cathedral and argue that authority has become a weapon.
Exactly, distorting spirituality into a mere mechanism for earthly power.
And finally, argument three, the projection. This is the most radical shift, and it's usually argued by the revolutionaries or the deeply disillusioned people, exactly like Curien.
This argument states that gods do not demand hierarchy. Humans do. Humans demand hierarchy to manage their own terrifying fear of the unknown.
And the sacred simply becomes a mirror of the society that creates it, used as a political tool. It's just dressed up in holy robes to ensure the peasants keep plowing the fields.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, synthesizing these three arguments gives us the core philosophical insight of all our sources combined. To quote the research directly, religious hierarchy tells us less about the divine and more about ourselves.
So what does this all mean for us? If we accept that we build these temples ourselves, does that destroy the sacred? I mean, does realizing that the blueprint was drafted by human hands ruin spirituality? Or does it actually liberate us to build better, more equitable structures?
I would argue it is profoundly liberating. Recognizing that a hierarchy is constructed means recognizing that it can be deconstructed.
Right. If the Santery can engineer a pantheon specifically for oppression, humanity possesses the exact same capacity to engineer systems for freedom.
Understanding the mechanics of these structures removes the paralyzing shield of divine mandate from those holding power. It shifts the responsibility for the shape of our society away from the heavens and places it squarely back in our own hands.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by looking at how human beings possess this deep psychological craving for order to escape the terrifying chaos of existence.
And to satisfy that craving, we built four distinct models of sacred architecture.
The vertical pyramid, the cyclical authority of reincarnation, the strict legal moral authority of the scholars, and the distributed authority of divine archetypes. And then we stepped into the fictional world of San Vitae to see the terrifying endpoint of weaponized belief.
And the final critical insight we must take away from this dossier is this. Religious hierarchies shape civilizations not because the divine necessarily demands it, but because humans do.
When the sacred is structured, society obeys.
Understanding this reveals exactly how human belief becomes political power, and how that power over generations becomes human destiny.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We've seen how humans crave order and how we built these massive structures to satisfy it. But I want to leave you with a final lingering question to ponder on your own.
Something to really chew on.
Imagine you woke up tomorrow, much like Curien did, and discovered irrefutable proof that every sacred hierarchy in human history was entirely human-made. Without the cosmic HR department telling you what your place is, how would you define your own moral compass, and who would you choose to follow?